Michael from OneSky, back with another new moon video. This new moon is going to take place on the 2nd of July 2019. It's a full solar eclipse. The totality will be visible from the South Pacific between New Zealand and Argentina. And it's an exciting moon. It's an exciting moon because of the alignments and the arrangements that it represents. And we're going to take a dive into that to see how to align with these energies, to live your life to the fullest and set those intentions that come with the new moon in order that they can sprout and grow and come to fruition in an easy, in an assisted way, because we know which way the winds are blowing. So let's jump right in and look at this chart. Right away, you'll notice that the signs are different. If you're used to even sign astrology or mainstream Western astrology, this looks a little bit different. We have the sign of Virgo here, much larger than the sign of Libra or Scorpio, and we're including the constellation of Fucus. That is all because we're using the actual size and location of the real constellations, the actual heavens. So this isn't oriented to a zodiac that's representational. When I talk about Gemini, I'm talking about the constellation Gemini and the stars of Gemini. This is the way that ancient people practiced astrology up until the period of late antiquity in Greece. And this is the way I practice astrology. So if that's a little different to you, check it out. Kind of stay watching. I encourage you. It's not that bad. To all you tropicalists who want to poo-poo the sidereal approach. But that's all I'm going to say on that. Jumping in to this new moon, we can see it here. The sun conjunct the moon, both at 11 degrees, 40 minutes of the constellation of Gemini. And this is exciting because Gemini is very curious, very interested, very movement oriented. And so we see with some of the relationships that are happening, like this most notable sextile to Uranus and Aries, we can see that this is going to be a great time for change, for movement, for growth. Now, a new moon is always a time to set intentions, to kind of plant the seed of the plan or the activity that you want to see sprout and grow and flourish and fruit in that lunar cycle. This new moon in particular, conjoined to the north node here, is an eclipse. And as a full solar eclipse, we're going to be looking not just at the next lunation of 30 days, but at the next 6 months until December 26, 2019, when we have that next solar eclipse. What that means is that this is a good time to set the ordinary monthly intentions that we set when we're living in accord with the lunar cycles. This is also a great time to build longer-term goals, longer-term plans, to bring maybe a 6-month time frame into view and start looking at that and breaking it down, seeing how we want to orient our energies to the energies that are supported, to the energies at large in the solar system. The sun and moon here in Gemini are in the degree of fixed star Elena. Elena is Gamma Gemini and is, I believe, the foot of Castor, but they're in 1 degree and 17 minutes of arc. So definitely an orb. That star has an orb of influence of 2 degrees and 20 minutes. And looking up Elena, the fixed star Gamma Gemini, it's a very positive influence. It's a very positive influence for ease, luxury, and pleasure. There may be honors that are gained at this time, but there's also a request that we use them. If we don't use them, there can be a danger of losing them. So anything we're given during this time, it's important to give back or pay it forward or put a mind to how we can use our newfound maybe influence, maybe resources to benefit others. With the moon conjunct Elena, we see good health, honor, riches, pleasure, and society. Also seeing domestic benefits. And all of this fixed star lore comes through Vivian Robson and his classic book, Fixed Stars and Constellations in Astrology. It's a good new moon. It's an auspicious start to a cycle with the influence of fixed star Elena imparting these kind of ease, luxury, good health, honor, riches, a lot of pleasure, a lot of benefits. It's really a great time to build in that direction. If we want to acquire or obtain those things for ourselves, now's a great time to look at what are the practical steps that we can take to get them. This is a full solar eclipse, again visible from the South Pacific, so not to most of us unless you're in maybe Venezuela or Argentina, but we're out in international waters for my jet setters. Anyway, this is a full solar eclipse. So as some of you know, eclipses happen in cycles called serocycles, which happen over the course of thousands of years. A serocycle starts at one of the poles of the Earth with an eclipse that's only visible there, and it moves down and around the Earth over the course of thousands of years, 2 or 3, I believe, with intermittent eclipses. So there are like around 20 serocycles active at any given time. And this eclipse comes from one of the oldest, serocycle North 3. Meaning that it started on the North Pole and is headed down, and it only has a handful of eclipse cycles that are older than it that are active at this time. According to Bernadette Brady in her book The Eagle and the Lark, she says this is an over-excessive eclipse family. Its main theme being either news involving young people or news that transforms a situation. This information can cause worry or can cause the person to become obsessive. The individual may want to undertake large plans or activities, which can be very positive as long as the individual doesn't get carried away. So there's a little bit in this that relates directly to Gemini. The first is news. News is Gemini's territory, the communication, the evolution, the transmission of ideas. And another aspect of this that has a lot to do with this particular lunation is that the individual may want to undertake large plans or activities. And what we see now with this new moon in sextile relationship to Uranus in Aries, wanting to undertake plans or activities at the beginning of a new cycle, sextile in sextile harmonious relationship to Uranus, is an influence of change, of new beginnings, of new growth, especially as it relates to ourself, our personal life, very much about self-image, healthy ego, self-esteem, any kind of growth, change, new beginnings around that, this is the time. This is the time to dig into that, and to check what's going on there. What's going on there with what you want to build in the next month, in the next 6 months, as far as things that might be having to do with individuality, with assertiveness, with our drive and our drive for our higher truth, our drive to express our true self. Anything around that is going to be very supported if we set that intention to build in those areas. What we see with the North Node here conjoined to this new moon is we see that this is an energy of looking forward. We have on our side a certain glimpse to the future that's afforded us both by the North Node, which is concerned with future things, and Uranus, which is always the harbinger of novelty. Uranus, we see the emergence of things that didn't previously exist. It's not always so much that there's an evolution that follows sequentially, but sometimes with Uranus, we'll just see a burst of it can even be very eccentric or individualistic in the case of its placement in Aries. But we do see futurism, forward-looking, a drive to the creative, to the fantastic ability to bring into being those things that don't necessarily exist, but maybe could. So that's the energy of this new moon in a nutshell. A great time for getting together, a great time for socializing, a great time for communicating in our inner worlds, a great time for looking ahead, a great time for planning, for taking assessment of our self-image, for taking assessment of how we are in the realm of communication, how we are in Gemini's territory, which has everything to do with flow, the traffic of information. And since this moon's in Gemini, we see that the dispositor of the new moon, the sun and moon, is Mercury here, because Mercury rules Gemini. And Mercury is placed in an interesting placement, conjoined to Mars in Cancer. Now, Cancer is not one of the happiest places for Mars. And where Mars is our essential drive, our essential libido, our assertiveness, it's a very outward focused energy, Martian energy. It's always engaged. And Cancer is more inward, is ruled by the moon, and it has more to do with protecting, with nurturing, with things like the family or the interpersonal. So where Mars tends to be more just personally driven, Cancer is a very interpersonal influence. And where Mars tends to be where we put our fist in the air and say, let's fill in the blank. In Cancer, you'd fill in that blank with let's nurture. So it's not a really easy influence. If this is going to be probably an easier full moon for women than men, to speak very generally about that, because women are more in tune with that lunar energy and more in tune with the nurturing, compassionate, caring side of themselves. For those of us whose expression of Martian energies is more outward, more about competition, more about bravery, more about adventure, more about martial skill, more about warfare or those sorts of Martian dimensions. This is going to be a time to kind of rein that in. And I say that not because I like to tell people what to do, but because that's kind of the direction the wind is blowing. You may want to express certain energies out of the nature of your own person, but the wind might be pushing directly in your face. And Cancer's wind tends to push directly in Mars's face. So the one way to work with this that I've found, and my natal Mars is in Cancer, so I've had to work with this influence my whole life. And the one way I found to do it is to get passionate. That's Mars and Cancer's shared quality. Passionate about nurturing. In this case, this Mercury-Mars conjunction is trine up to Chiron. And so at this time we have this water trine between Pisces and Chiron. We could really get passionate about doing some emotional growth work, some digging, especially with Mars conjoined to Mercury, looking at any obstacles to our being able to be direct, to our thinking clearly, to our thinking directly, to our expressing ourselves in a nurturing, in a careful way, but also in a direct way. This is an amazing cycle to really drill down on that and hold that as an intention to focus on throughout this 30 days and the next 6 months. We also see this Mars-Mercury conjunction in Cancer square up to Uranus. And whenever we see Uranus squares and whenever we see Mercury squares, we can see that there's the potential for some anxiety. Uranus and Mercury are both a little more anxious as planetary influences, and the square can be a little bit of a difficult aspect to dance with. The best way to do it is to set that intention to one, align with the properties of this, and again with Mars, Mercury, and Cancer. The properties of that are around communication and thought that's direct but kind, and activity that's nurturing, activity that's healing and supportive on an emotional level. And with Uranus in Aries, we have new beginnings, new births, especially around self-image, self-ego, drive, assertiveness, our territory. We have looking into, with the lens of Uranus, the higher truth, the real energy, the higher principles of that, and finding maybe also our own genius, maybe giving birth to insight or innovation around the area of our personal world, the realm of ourselves. Another thing that's happening here is something that some astrologers aren't even paying attention to. They're not reading it. Over here you'll see that the Sun and Moon are making a weak opposition to Saturn. Saturn is retrograde and just passed over the South Node, to put this roughly looking to the past, looking behind us. And it just happened it's going to happen on the 29th of June, which is, I think, 4 or 5 days before this solar eclipse. So Saturn is really fresh in its energies from having just merged with its history. And Saturn is where we see control, authority, restriction. Saturn's where we see a lot of obstacles, and when a Saturn opposition pops up, I think we're going to see a fundamental expression of dynamic tension between the energies at large, which are the sun and moon, to mind-blowing extent, but also the energies of Saturn and its conservative nature, its slow bent, and Saturn's in an interesting position because it's moving up here. It's moving up here, creeping slowly towards a conjunction with Pluto in January 2020. Now, anytime Pluto touches something, Pluto demands change. And Saturn always resists change. So you have this energy of Saturn resisting change, approaching Pluto, who's going to transform it. And it knows this. And it just moved retrograde. Just moved retrograde, I think, within the last month or two, and went back over the south node. So this second contact is like a really full review in the realm of our structures, our orthodoxies, our systems of control. And it's a big time status check. It's a total look at the past. If we're tuned into the whole chart, if we're looking at the skies holistically, if we're aware of all the aspects of our psyche, that sort of thing. Because here in the realm of new beginnings, we do have the dominant energy of this cycle. But like I said, there could be some dynamic tension between the new beginnings represented here and the past represented by Saturn. All right, everyone. I think that brings us to a good place in our understanding. This new moon, full solar eclipse in Gemini, conjoined to the North Node, sextile to Uranus. Big energy of looking forward. We're going to have an opportunity here to set the pace. So as this new moon approaches, really take some time and think about the seeds you want to plant. How do you want to move into the future, looking at this 30 days and looking at this 6-month cycle? How do you want to move into the future, supported by new growth in the realm of self, supported by what could be a little bit of a dampened, or for some of us it might seem like a hampered Mars expression? How do we want to channel our energies in flow and in alignment with the celestial energies? I will say that although Mars is in detriment in Cancer, Cancer more than any other sign is like this perfect petri dish because it is of the nature of supportive. It wants Mars to grow. The energy of the stars of Cancer are going to nurture and support anything they touch. So with Mars and Mercury conjoined, again, the very best thing to do is work on directness of communication while being kind, supportive, and careful. All right, everybody. I'll see you next time for the full moon lunar video and any other videos I might make between now and then. Thanks for watching, as always.